My whole life I've been exposed to video games. At a very early age I was treated to the Intellivision, Atari, and an arcade game in practically every gas station I went to. While various systems brought so many great games, getting a computer would usher in a whole different type of game to me, the adventure game. Sprawling stories that took you to magical lands, or way into outer space following bumbling janitors. They all had a great story to tell, and you could easily invest yourself into it. Thankfully, the developers started to get the idea and would bring a few of these ideas to consoles like Sega CD. One big example to this was the first game I'd ever gotten with that big MA17 rating on it. To a 13-year-old boy, this was big. Rise of the Dragon released on the Sega CD when they had freshly implemented these new video game ratings. Sure, I had Mortal Kombat, but those new ratings gave me help to find those games that were a little more risque. Judging a book by its cover isn't always a good indicator of a good game, but it should be when it says MA17. I was giddy to see what kind of disgusting things they'd put into this game. Turns out, it was pretty mild.
And that of the crime for which it must be punished.
Yeah, to death!
A sexual reference here and there, a cuss word or two, and a bit of violence with a disturbing image or two peppered in for good measure. If you were to rate it by today's media, it's PG at best. So what is Rise of the Dragon? This game really embraces the fact that it is a B-movie stuffed into a video game, and for me, that's pretty great. It takes a lot of cues from Blade Runner and blends it into its own world. You play as William Blade Hunter, who dresses a lot like Harrison Ford in Blade Runner, a private investigator who is hired by the mayor of Los Angeles to investigate the death of his daughter. This leads Blade down a deadly path of drug manufacturers and a plot to resurrect a demon snake creature named Bahamut. As tall of a story that sounds, it actually all ties together. Rise of the Dragon is very much a point-and-click adventure with a lot of interesting visuals. There are a lot of instances where a game will hold your hand, so scrolling over something will change your icon to give you a clue as to something you have to do with that item. In this game, that, thankfully, isn't the case. The first time I played through this game, I found myself stuck in a few places because I overlooked something and really had to think about it. This was in a time that the internet still wasn't at everyone's fingertips, so walkthroughs were not a thing. For the most part, the game does a great job in the visuals. It paints a great picture of different locales in Los Angeles. Dark, gritty, dirty, busy, and interesting. The only problem with any of the graphics is there's an odd green hue to everything, like it's all happening in the Matrix. This was due to the color limitations of the Sega CD and couldn't give the wider images that were shown on the PC version. Even with a limited palette, it adds an odd, gritty flair to the visuals of the game. Rise of the Dragon tries to break up the normal point-and-click gameplay a bit though. In true moments of action, you're taken to the occasional side-scrolling level, and even a point-and-shoot level that has you blasting enemies instead of finding clues on the screen. Seemingly almost pulled from Snatcher. Snatcher did it better though. The side-scrolling levels has you dodging hazards and stiffly shooting enemies. They feel like they were poorly crafted and can be a bit on the annoying side. They are the toughest part of the game to get through. Not because they're hard or anything like that, but just downright annoying. To me, these sections took away from the game. The Sega CD version was fully voiced though, so it gave a layer of depth that the PC version didn't have originally. Some lines are pretty campy, others pretty decent. But the huge highlight for me is the fact that Cam Clark himself voices Blade, the king of voiceover work. Leonardo from the 80s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, Kaneda from the original Akira, frickin' Liquid Snake from Metal Gear Solid? Yep, that's him. And these were only 3 of his 300+ acting credits in his career. I had always thought he sounded a little familiar, but could never put my finger on it. Blade actually has a lot to say in the game, so what better way to use Clark's talent? In true point-and-click adventure game fashion, you could put your icon over practically anything, hit a button, and Blade would tell you all the details about it. Death scenes were no exception either. If you manage to slip up, you are treated to a death scene. Only death scenes are accompanied by Clark's cool, calm narration as Blade suffers some of the most disturbing deaths.
White, hot pain radiates outward from the drug patch on your neck. It's malignant mutagens burning agony into every nerve fiber as it warps the DNA of your body into something no longer remotely human.
So it's Cam Clark as Blade talking about his own death. It's creepy, but it's actually really good. I'm a huge fan of campy B-movies that came out in the early 90s, so this game really hits my heart in the softest spots. It gives you an interesting but laughable story flooded with cliches. This game is a short ride down a very weird story, but for what it's worth, it can be an enjoyable experience. Rise of the Dragon had a tagline on it too. It read, "A Blade Hunter Mystery." This made me think that there were previous games in a series of games, or better yet, there would be some sequels. Sadly, this never turned out to be the case. Rise of the Dragon is its own standalone story. Taglines aside, goofiness aside, the game holds a unique charm that teeters on the line of good and bad, which still makes me say it's worth a shot. Like it or hate it, you have to play Rise of the Dragon.
No, wait!